by the way, I don't know if you know this, Ian, but Frank's incredibly intimidating when you meet him in person for the first time. So like, I was like, I didn't have my full confident voice. I was like kind of looking down when I said hi to Frank the very first time.
Yeah, I've heard that before. He'd never intimidated me, but I was always so much higher up in the organization than him that I kind of looked down on him. He was more intimidated by me when we worked together. He kind of had a lower level position at MBR. He's since rebranded, similar to like Andrew Carnegie, who was kind of an asshole for the first 50 years of his life and then rebranded himself by putting his name on buildings. Frank was kind of a douchebag for the first 40 years, and he's convinced everyone a collective genius that he accomplished things before he got there. It's really, really incredible what he's done. Oh boy, loyal listeners, do we have a good one today? Steve Trang, owner and founder of a 7-figure education business. Dude left a cushy, high-paying job at Intel to get into real estate just as the market was absolutely collapsing. Had to struggle for a couple of years making no money and had a family to support. Grew his business, grew his realty up, and now has completely pivoted to a education business that is high margin and highly profitable. So many career lessons from this guy, so many nuggets in this one that we had to film it in 2 different parts. I like to say it that way because actually I screwed up the technology. But regardless, here we are with Steve. I think you're going to love this interview.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch!
Frankie, we got a guest today.
Yes, we do. One of my buddies.
Steve,
what's going on, fellas?
How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm so excited to be here. Frank is someone that I've been fanning on, for some time now. So when he asked me to come on, I couldn't say no. Couldn't say yes fast enough.
He has a worldwide following of admirers and lovers, gentlemen lovers, some in some places as well.
What did my wife say to you, Ian? I'm a very gentle lover.
Yes. So Frankie, tell me, how do you know Steve?
So through my network with real estate within the Collective Genius, Steve joined our group 2 to 3 years ago at this point. We've always really struggled to find someone who knows how to teach acquisition managers to do their job. So this isn't traditional real estate. It's not real estate agents. We're people who go out and buy houses at a discount. And it's a challenging thing to train for. Steve lives in the Phoenix, Arizona market. And he's going to give you a better history of himself than I will. But the way that I suffice is this. He's a thinker and a strategist. And what he realizes there's a formula to sales. And what he uses very well is he uses situations and psychology, and he teaches people how to use those things to drive at, are you a seller? And how can I help you solve problems where I ultimately can get a great price? And there's a service and a component. The thing I like about Steve is he's an ethical operator, hard to find in our business. He promotes the customer. And what we've been doing for well over 2 years now is I pay a monthly fee, but I get to send anybody that's in my acquisition team to his trainings, which he does online. And he's going to get into how all that stuff works. But it's been a great thing for our team. And we just call it Trang Trainings. I know he's got a really official name for it. And we go over every Monday Trang's notes. And we go through, what did he teach? What are the takeaways? What's applicable to the business? It's been hugely helpful for us.
What I loved, Steve, just in doing a little bit of half-ass homework on you by looking at
half-ass internet research, baby.
Half-ass internet research. That's right. Our crack team of me and Frank. I was just looking at your timeline, and it's fascinating how you started in real estate. You started as a realtor. You learned the trade. Then you started your own realtor's office. Then you branched off into some title, did some other things. You got this expertise. You grinded long enough to really learn, something of value to other people. And then
Yep.
you started coaching, and then you started training, and then you built programs, you built a social media following. So I think for anyone listening, Steve has a really interesting path of learning, becoming an expert in something, and leveraging that expertise to build your own business, and branching off to where what you were doing in 2007, you rarely do it all anymore. You've
Yeah.
branched into a whole different, real estate. Your world is around real estate, but you
Mhm.
really become more of an influencer, a trainer, a coach, a consultant. And that's what your business primarily makes revenue on now.
I really appreciate you saying it so kindly, because I've always just kind of looked at, I've just got massive shiny object syndrome, and I'm going to chase what makes the most business sense at the moment. So
Yeah.
I'm very tactical, or maybe strategic, and I kind of see like, this is where the future is at. This is where I need to dedicate my resources, the 80-20 rule. So I really appreciate you saying it so kindly, because it's a much more respectful way of saying this mess I've created.
Well, if I'm nothing, I'm very kind. I'm a very kind person. So
Yeah.
So
Our lawyer listeners will not agree with that at all.
well, not to Frank. So 2007, you get into real estate. Is that your first entry into real estate? Getting your realtor's license?
Well, it was, I was buying rental properties, or trying to buy rental properties. So we did acquire, 1 or 2 properties at this point. So it was my first as a business venture. This was the first step away from passive income and towards active income for real estate.
But before that, you were working for a corporation. You were working for,
I was working for
a company.
Intel.
Yeah,
I was
you were working for
I was
Intel.
working for Big Blue. Yeah.
And so is Intel what you did right after college? Did you go right after Intel?
Yeah. So when I graduated ASU in 2002, this is right after 9/11 and the dot-com bust. So no one was really hiring. And so only jobs I could get with my degree was like a $50,000 testing job, which I had no interest in. It's like, I didn't suck life for 4 years in college to get an electrical engineering degree to make $50,000 a year. And so I went to graduate school because that's the only other option. And thankfully, I was able to get a full ride to UC San Diego. I was a PhD student. I didn't finish it, but I finished with a master's degree. And after a year and a half, the winds started to change. And so Intel was hiring at that point. So I went to go work at Intel. I did fully intend to be a PhD student, but then I realized I'd be working for 3.5 more years for free. I realized that's not what I wanted to do. So
yeah, that's a
went to
lot of
Intel.
years of school. Is it, are the stories of parties at ASU accurate? Because I went to Purdue University, and we were always top 5 for party schools in the world, but we were always chasing Arizona State, I felt like.
Well, I wish I could give you some empirical evidence, but I was an engineering student, so I got nothing for you there.
Same here. I was an engineer, but Purdue actually sucked for parties. So
Yeah.
So you get all these degrees, you get a job at Intel, which, there was a time where Intel was that's about as good a job as you could possibly get out of schooling.
It was a great job. I wish I could have given my job to somebody else, truthfully, because I was working probably about 25 hours a week, and I was, taking really long lunches, regularly napping right during lunch. So it was a great job. My bosses were always great. I wasn't micromanaged, and no matter what, I was always delivering, excellent results. So it was a great opportunity. It just turns out I'm not a manageable person, and I took working for somebody to learn that.
Well, so stay on that. When you say you're not a manageable person, you seem like a really nice guy. Is it just more you wanted some autonomy in how you spent your time and what you focused on? In big companies,
Yeah.
there's only so much of that to go around.
Yeah, so when I went to grad school, I was actually interested in engineering, and like the things that I was learning, I was reading research papers, and like, here's the latest in technology, and like, here are things you can do to optimize design. And once you get to the real world, you don't get to do any of those things, because if I go and experiment and I make a mistake, I'm costing Intel billions of dollars. So I'm not allowed to do the things I learned, right, in graduate school. And then the other thing too was there were 6 core values when we were at Intel, and one of them was disagree and commit, which I think is an awesome core value, right? Like you and me, we argue about something, but once we're done, we agree this is what we're gonna do, and then we're gonna move forward with this direction. And for me, where I'm talking about not manageable. All right, Ian's my manager, and Ian says, Steve, this is how we're going to do the project. And I just disagree, right? But because you're my boss, I have to do it. And so I would do it your way. And I would still do it my way and still get it done early. And then once we're in production, you'll see that my idea was actually better. So that is not, I was absolutely violating the core values of Intel, but my results spoke for themselves.
Yeah. Were you, when you were at Intel, were they still giving out sabbaticals to people after they'd been with the company for a certain amount of time?
They
Did
were.
you stick around long enough to get one? Did you get a
that was the
sabbatical?
plan. The plan was to work for 7 years, get my sabbatical, quit. By then, hopefully find a wife that's got a job and benefits so that I can go and do my whole entrepreneurial thing. But after 3.5 years, I can't do this anymore.
You couldn't
So I
make it
left.
until the sabbatical. How long was
not.
the sabbatical? It's long too. How long
It's
do they
2
give you?
months. So if you timed it right, you got your 2 month sabbatical plus your 3 to 4 weeks vacation. I mean, it was a 3-month vacation.
Yeah, I had a few friends that I graduated with, engineers that I remember they spent like 3 months in Europe, and I was like, you quit? And they're like, no, Intel lets us do this. And I was like, wow, that's pretty incredible. And same thing, it's actually brilliant. 2 of them stayed with the company 7 years just to get the sabbatical and then left short. I bet a ton of people leave after that sabbatical.
Yep.
Probably stick around 6 months.
It was not uncommon for people to quit after the sabbatical.
You didn't make it though. So part of it was the feeling you were having of just feeling kind of crowded and wanting to make your own decisions. Were you, when you started to move over to now, did you go right from Intel to being a realtor?
Yeah. So when we were buying rental properties, I met a real estate broker, and I was like, what you do is really fascinating. I was like, how much do you make as a real estate agent? He's like, oh, I make 6 figures easily. I said, okay. And what do you do exactly? I was like, I just kind of hang out and talk to people. Really? I can do that. And that's more than I make. Like, what would it take for me to learn that skill? He's like, you go get your real estate license. I'll teach you everything I know. I said, no problem. And talking about like a fast mover, literally in 2.5 weeks, I got my real estate license and I submitted my 2 weeks notice. It was a very quick decision.
Now, did you have some money saved up in the bank? Are you a saver? Did you have a little cushion to?
I think I had like maybe 14, 15 grand, not a whole lot. I mean, comparatively speaking, not enough to run a business, but what I did have was a line of credit on my home, like 50,000 available on my line of credit, and an insane amount of confidence. I've always been irrationally confident in even in situations where I should not have been.
I play basketball with him a lot. You can say that at the 3-point line as well. So let me ask a couple quick questions here. So you started Intel in 04?
Yep, January 04.
And then you were there through 07, like 7.5, somewhere between 7 and 8.
Yeah. So I submitted my 2 weeks notice in April of 07, and I went all in May of 07.
And you were buying rentals in Phoenix in what years? 05, 06, 07?
06.
And how did what ultimately happened to those?
They got foreclosed on. The ones that, we bought one up north and one in Austin. The one in Austin actually was good. That one actually we sold to cover our losses from our other deals, which, man, looking back, wish we kept that one. Yeah, so we were buying rentals in 05, 06.
So you had the absolute worst timing to get into real estate. So what was your first couple of years like when you quit a good job and you get into like the housing abyss in the middle of 07?
Well, so first, it's weird when you have a corporate job and you have like a schedule.
And then you go to no schedule, no boss.
You go to no schedule. Yeah. So that was a disaster. So I was completely unproductive for quite some time. So there was that. It was really hard to get deals. Now, I eventually learned how to get leads and so on. But I will share, in 2008 was my very first full year, and my expenses exceeded my revenue by $50,000. So when I filed my taxes, my accountant, it's not a good sign when your accountant looks at you and says, "I'm sorry," when he's done with your taxes, right? That was really rough. Maxed out my credit cards. And then this was a time I got married in 07 as well. Did the ultimate bait and switch with my wife. And the D word was dropped multiple times, right? In this distress. Like I still got scar tissue, right? When people are talking about like flipping like 20, 30 houses at a time, like for me, I still have anxiety, right? From that, which I don't feel comfortable scaling a flipping operation.
Yeah, because your primary source of I guess pride in a marriage is being an earner. When you're a guy, you want to be known as an earner, and here you are, you just got married and you're losing money, and you had some stability before you got married. So I can imagine that drove a lot of stress in your house.
A lot of stress. And my wife she's Asian, and so stability, I mean, I think for most women they want stability, but I think even more so in an Asian household. So I mean, she was losing sleep every night. So I mean, on top of the stress of not having money, also the stress of not sleeping was definitely not a good situation.
So what about your oh, sorry, go ahead, Frank.
It's all right. So as we say in the business, you can't make up a 50K loss on volume. How did you kind of get out of that? Because I'm guessing this was kind of a pole vault to where you ultimately will go. So yeah, 08's bad. How does 09 through 13 go until you launch?
The big thing was getting an REO account. So working with the banks. So at this time, if you want to be successful, you have to list foreclosure properties. So you got to work with Chase, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and so on. And every realtor was knocking on the front door, right? They're going to bankofamerica.com, applying to be an REO agent, and all these other things. And I followed all those steps, did all the BPOs as they required, right, to earn your stripes. I did all those things, the right things. And that gets you absolutely nowhere. And so after being frustrated with that, I just went to the REO conferences in Dallas, in Denver, and hung out with the asset managers. And the way I was able to get my REO business was I would actually take them out, go clubbing, get bottle service, right? Talk to girls, bring them back to where we were having bottle service. So I was just getting asset managers drunk and starting conversations for them. That's how I got my business back off the ground as an REO agent. So prior to doing that, I wasn't getting REO business.
So two of my favorite, I love the show Winning Time, which is about the 80s Lakers. And I also love the movie Aviator. And in both instances, they're both like, we'll get people drunk and we'll get them laid if they're into that. And I'm not saying it's the right system, but it's the current system. So it worked. And then
it works.
Tried and true for hundreds of years. It's a good strategy.
Going back to the dawn of time. And for those of you that don't know this, REO accounts are real estate owned accounts. This is stuff that have been foreclosed by banks. And what Steve was trying to do was, do all the right stuff so he'd get noticed, and then realized if he opened his wallet and took people out, they would like him. And through relationships, he built an ability to get these accounts and have the listings. So this is your functioning as a listing agent, listing these properties.
Right.
So that was from 08 through about 13.
I would say that was probably around 09 to 11. I'll say, okay, because I got in late, right? Because I was going through the front door trying to do the right way, and that went nowhere. It was just the Hail Mary in 09. It's like, all right, let's max out our credit cards one more time. Let's figure this out. And
so how close were you to going back to a corporate job, getting back into
very close. It was right around that time, 09.
Were you almost to the point of looking for job, like looking online at different jobs and putting?
I actually went back to Intel to talk to them, because I remember when I stopped in 07, they're like, hey, come back anytime, right? Like you're a valuable member. Anytime if you want a job back, doors open. And in 09, right, again, with my wife miserable and an unsatisfactory marriage for her, which as a husband is an unsatisfactory marriage for me, right? Like you feel like a piece of crap when you can't support your wife.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? Fine. If this is what you want, if this will make you happy, then I will go back to Intel. And I actually went back and talked to my old boss and talked to my old peers. And they're like, sorry, like this economy is so bad. We really want you, but we can't have you right now. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
But that's a gut punch while you're dealing with it, living through it.
It is, but also I think was the necessary burning of the boats I needed.
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
Yeah. You had no plan B. You had nothing to go back to. You had
There
to go
was no
make,
more plan B.
you had to make real
It just
estate work.
vaporized.
And if you're
Yeah.
listening to this and you weren't around in real estate, Steve joined, you joined beyond late in the real estate cycle.
Mhm.
You stepped into the batter's box in the 9th inning with 2 outs and a couple strikes on you.
Yeah.
You had no chance of getting the wave of selling. You had to
Mm-mm.
go into the, space of foreclosures, because that's all there was.
All there was.
09 was just a wasteland.
Oh my God, it was terrible.
so depressing. So
And
depressing.
what I got to see when I joined 08, 09 was a bunch of realtors getting divorced and a bunch of contractors getting divorced. Like that's what I walked into, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You couldn't get someone couldn't get a mortgage to buy a house back then. Prices were dropping like a chainsaws. You couldn't catch it. Like no one was in that space. So many people builders went out of business, contractors went out of business, realtors, loan officers, people still not back in the business, just went out. Frank always jokes, half of our sales reps at NVR, a big home builder we worked, they became teachers, they became waitresses, and they never came back. That was it. That was their career ended in real estate in 09.
January of 09 is when I started my company. And I would imagine after you weren't doing great, had a 50K loss the year before, you went back to Intel and they said, we can't hire you. It was a lot easier to sell your wife. I'm going clubbing, but it's for the business. It was a hell of a lot easier to sell.
We didn't really talk about it, right? We just went out there and got, hey, just fly back. Hey, I got business.
So you you do some clubbing, you take some guys out, have a good time. 09, you get a few of these REO accounts. And do you start making money at this point, or are you just now starting to learn how to get leads?
I am at this point making up for lost time, right? And then the other thing too is finally learning how to have an assistant, because up until this point, right, I've been a solopreneur. So having an REO account, you can't do all this yourself. So you need an assistant, right? And there was no like great way of hiring an assistant. It was just, I need an assistant. So you go to Craigslist and you get the hundreds of applicants and all these other things. So yeah, I learned at this point how to, or at least not learn how to, I started learning about hiring and recruiting and managing people.
So how many deals did you close, REO deals did you close before you came to the determination of, I got to hire someone because I've got more leads than I can handle?
I don't think it was very long. I think maybe a few months. Because the most painful thing as an REO agent, not the most painful thing, but one of the painful things as an REO agent is you got to front all the expenses. So if the house needs a new roof, Steve Trang, the realtor, is paying for the new roof and then submitting an invoice to the bank for reimbursement. And if you don't follow their specific instructions, you're not getting reimbursed. So I know people that were out 6 figures annually. That was just their cost of doing business and lost reimbursements. I was never that guy, right? That had to be buttoned down.
But as you're starting on that, you're putting all that on credit cards. You're putting that on personal credit cards. You're maxing out
Personal
different
credit
cards. So your debt, not only are you not making money in 08, in 09 to get this new account, you're having to explain to your wife why you are incurring a ton of debt. Not only not making money, I'm putting us in a disastrously perilous situation.
Again, communication was not necessarily great. I'm not recommending this.
I'm sweating just thinking of these discussions. I'm sweating right now.
I don't recommend this, but here's what I learned, and I read books about this, right? So there's no right or wrong way. I did learn that my wife did not handle stress well, and that's still true today, right? I mean, the poor woman, I love her, but man, I drive her crazy. So stress it doesn't go well with her. So it's kind of like, monkey see or no see, like, how do I say it? Right. I'm just not telling her all the bad things that are happening.
Hear no evil, see no evil.
There you go. Yeah. See no evil, hear no evil. I am just grinding. I am all in. I am regularly working from, I want to say 8:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. So this put a lot of pressure on our family. My wife, when we first met, was, she thought she was dating someone that was an engineer, that's got a good stable background, that's gonna, did everything a good boy's supposed to do in the Asian culture, right? Like go get good grades, get a good job, and then live stably forever, right? And I just did the ultimate bait and switch. So as far as the credit card situation, it really freaked her out. There were a lot of sleepless nights, and they say that finance is a lot of the reasons why people get divorced, and it puts a lot of strain in the marriage. Well, I got to experience that. It's not just the finances, it's the sleepless nights too. It's this compounding situation where she's constantly worried when we're going to get paid next. She's worried about, we never got, she never got to experience the credit card getting declined. I did. She never really went through that far, and as far as depth goes, but she knew it was bad. I wasn't completely honest with her, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. Is that I'm the kind of person that's got nearly infinite risk tolerance, and my wife has nearly zero risk tolerance. And so anytime I kind of brought up a bad situation, it would like really upset her. So I just was conditioned, Pavlov's dogs was, I'm not going to tell her any more bad news. And it got really bad. So thankfully, she's an amazing woman, and she actually got a second job so that we can keep things going.
Pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
the sacrifice she put in while you weren't earning, but you believed in yourself enough, and she believed in you enough to give you enough rope to go figure out how to do this. You mentioned something, Steve, but I think it's worth staying at it for just a second. The Asian culture. One of my best friends is Vietnamese, and he jokes all the time about how his dad basically threw him out when he told him he wasn't going to be a lawyer or a doctor, because that was pounded into him as a kid of get that degree, go get that job, make money the rest of your life. And he was like a pariah when he said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get into real estate. And he ended up being a loan officer and worked his way up. And he said it took him years to kind of earn it back with his family.
100%.
How do you, you say you have near infinite risk growing up in the Asian culture. How were you able to kind of overcome some of that pressure of the Asian culture?
Well, I mean, I think for better or for worse, what my parents thought were important, what my parents thought of me was important, but outside of that, like everyone else's opinion is mostly irrelevant. I've kind of have a personality, look at the predictive index individualist. I'm going to do whatever I think is best for me.
That explains a lot.
But as far as my parents, like they weren't gung-ho against it. They just thought I was stupid, right? They weren't like, I'm going to disown you, where it was really more of like, why would you throw this all away? You went to you got good grades, you got a full ride I got a full ride to ASU. I not only got a full ride to UC San Diego, they paid me to go to UC San Diego, right? Like no one talks about recruiting in engineering. We talk about recruiting in athletics, but I got recruited by UCLA, UC San Diego. I got accepted into Stanford, and they paid me to go, and I got my degree. And I was like, you know what? After working for Intel for years, like this isn't for me. And man, they were not thrilled. They were disappointed, but they were also totally supportive. And it's kind of funny, like I'm finally doing well in real estate, and my mom's like, it's not too late to go back to get your PhD. I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about?
Still thinking about it. Still thinking of that advanced degree.
Yeah.
So your wife allows you to get to this point. You get there, and she takes a second job. At what point did the money start coming in?
Money started coming in when we started getting the REO accounts, when we started listing properties for banks, and that really dug us out of a hole. But we didn't get rich off of it. Because I got late in the game, I didn't have hundreds of transactions like some of these guys did. I was only doing, still, I think in my best year in REO, I did a little over 50 transactions, which is, some of these guys are doing that every single month, right? So I wasn't killing it. And it wasn't until, and truthfully, as a realtor, I never really killed it as far as finances. I did really well by all the metrics, when after I opened my brokerage, we were doing 100+ transactions a year as a team, so I was one of the top 40 agents. I won all these awards, 40 under 40 and so on. But you guys know in real estate, it doesn't matter how many houses you sell or what your revenue is. Your top line is totally irrelevant because it's what you take home. And I got 3 years of blowing up my ego and all this revenue, and I felt like I had almost nothing to show for it. truthfully. And so like when I watch these guys talking about how many houses I wholesale or flip or this or that, in the back of my mind, it's like, I remember when that used to be important to me.
So I want to ask, I want to bridge the gap here. So from where you are in this story, what year is it to where are we now? Like, what year is that? And then it's 2022, like how far between where you are now was that?
So when I was doing really well, so the REO days was from 2009 to 2011. And then the team that's doing really well was 2014 to 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 5 years ago. And in that stretch of time, can I ask a question? Like in 2017 to that point, what was your best year, of net?
Best year net, like 150,000.
Right. So you pivoted drastically from there to here. Let's talk about, I think the thing to ask Ian is this: what does your day-to-day look like today? And how different is that from then and why?
My day-to-day,
like I know you well enough to know you're vastly different now than that.
Yeah. So my day-to-day today predominantly involves one of three things. I'm either in meetings with the teams, right? Depending on which company, right, we're talking about. So because we have multiple companies. So I'm in meetings, and these are either level specific things we need to discuss within the organization, specific issues. I am creating content. This would be considered the category of creating content, podcasting. We launched a second podcast, about to launch a third podcast, creating content for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, so on, which is so funny to me that this is active work, but it is in 2022. And the third thing is fulfilling what we've sold, right? I'm really blessed to be a sales trainer. I get to train the top in the country in sales. And so fulfillment of coaching in one manner or another are the three things that I
So
do.
Ian, I'm gonna get a couple things laid out here and I'm gonna let you dig into them. Businesses. What you said, your multiple businesses. What are your multiple businesses?
So we still have a brokerage. It's ending next month. We have a title company. We wholesale / fix and flip. And we have an education company, and we're getting our media company off the ground. And then I just recently entered a partnership in the last 7 days about, investing in crypto and so on.
Okay. Revenue mix out of all that, is the majority of your revenue coming from the sales training business, the education business now?
A majority of the revenue would actually come from wholesaling and fix and flip, but the majority of the profit would come from education.
Education. Right. Okay.
One's brings in a lot more revenue. One brings in a lot more profit.
Yeah, 100%. So I have an education business. It's very high margin stuff once you build it out. So how did you tell me how the education business started? What was the first kind of light bulb of I could charge people for my knowledge?
I have a podcast, Real Estate Disruptors, which I launched in 2018. And this was just like, I'm going to start a podcast, right? See where this goes. Really had no idea what the plan was with it specifically. It was just, it'd be cool if someday, this becomes something. On that show, we had Max Maxwell come in. He's a very influential person in the wholesaling space. He's got a giant YouTube channel, massive amount of followers. When he came on the show, while we were talking, he's like, Steve, I like what you're doing with the show. I'd love to have you come speak at my event. Wholesaling Elite Live 19, shorthand was We Live 19, is Dallas of March of 2019. And while I was there, I was like, okay, cool. Yes. People ask you about, hey, do you want to do this? The answer is always yes, right? Like if this is something that can be big, yes. And I'll figure the rest out later on.
Sure.
And so when I was coming up with like what I want to talk about, I said, well, we're wholesaling in Phoenix. And I've learned a lot through the Sandler selling system. Chris Voss never split the difference and so on. I was like, let me just share our sales philosophy on stage. And so I spent 30, 45 minutes talking about how we run our sales process in front of over 1,000 people, which I had never done before. So that was the second most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done. But after I did that, I had so much overwhelmingly positive feedback from what we shared that not only did people send me messages on social media for the next 3 months, like, hey, I did this, it worked. I did this, it worked. Thank you so much. People were also posting about it on social media, tagging me saying, hey, here's the line I used from Steve Trang and it helped me do this. So I could see that it had a massive impact in just the 30 minutes I spoke on stage. That's when I knew I had a product.
So what is your sales philosophy? Clearly, I think we covered this at some point, but like we pay you every month and I send my sales team, my acquisition managers, they come to you for sales training, right? So,
Yeah.
but like for this audience, what is your sales philosophy? Like if you could summarize it relatively quick.
I think a few points, a few principles is seeking first to fully understand the other person and understand what keeps them up at night, right? If you can really understand what they're struggling with, what is causing them stress, concern in their own personal lives, in their family, and so on, and not just like being aware of it, which is where most people kind of stop, is like really diving deep and finding out how it's impacting, how they're feeling about it emotionally. So I think first, diving deep into understanding what their situation is, and then B, after, we call this diagnosing, prescribing, right? Saying like, hey, this is what you're going through. Here's how I think we may be able to help you. I'm not sure if this works for you, right? So diagnosing and before prescribing. The third thing is we're very assertive, but we're not aggressive, right? We really push hard for a yes or a no, but we do not close hard for a yes. We just push really hard for a yes or a no. We do it professionally, respectfully, but we're pretty firm. Like, hey, Frank, at the end of our meeting today, it's gonna be yes or no. You're not allowed to think about it. Now we say that professionally again, right, with all courtesy. But at the end of the day, it's a yes or no. You're not allowed to think about it. And if you tell me you need to think about it, we'll just accept it as a no. We'll just move on. It's no big deal, right? And so there's elements of reverse psychology, things we learn, as kids on the playground. Hey, Frank, I bet you can't do this, and then watch me do this. And so we take it away a lot. There are a lot of similarities between sales and dating. So, we play kind of like the bad boy who's like, hey, if you don't want this, that's okay, right? If you don't want to work with us, that's all right. Just tell us no, we'll move on. First is the commission breath of like closing hard for the yes. I think closing hard for the yes, people feel that they don't like it and they'll move away. So it's really, hey, here's something that we can do. Here's something we can offer to get you out of a bad situation. And if it doesn't work for you, that's right. Just tell me no, I'll move on. No big deal. And that's probably our sales philosophy in a nutshell.
Sounds a little bit mix of, when I hear you say seek to understand, that's classic Dale Carnegie right there. Seek to understand, then be understood.
100%.
A lot of Chris Voss in there, split the difference. I love all the Voss stuff. That's good. But I love the way you kind of mix a number of them and make it your own, which is nothing's new, right? Sales has been around for thousands of years. Nothing's new. You just try to take the best ideas that have worked for you and then apply it to stories that are in your business.
Right.
Same thing.
I learned from a friend, Mike Self, right? It's stealing if you take it from one source, but if you steal it from multiple sources, it's research.
Yeah. Well, and also
modeling.
It's not just stealing. You can steal idea. Any a-hole can read a book and steal some ideas and then respit it. I think what makes a good trainer, I guess, memorable at least, or impactful, is taking the concepts and applying it to personal stories that have worked for them. Those are the people that leave me with, compelled to act. Like, you take an idea I've heard before, but then you apply it to a situation I've never heard before, and all of a sudden it's magical. Then it feels like, oh, I hadn't thought about using it in the way that you just, that application now becomes unique to Steve.
Right. And that's what the feedback we've gotten, that what they've appreciated is that, almost every scenario, we have a really good story to explain how to apply it effectively. So it's not regurgitating lessons. It's like, we're getting our butts kicked in the streets in Phoenix too. So you get teaching what works for us.
You get a big win. You go up on stage in front of a lot of people who encourage you. You hadn't thought about it before. You hadn't even thought of this as something you could sell, but they encourage you. They tell you you've got something here. Now your confidence is higher and that you have a product you could sell. From that point, did you decide I need to go build this into something a little more formal?
Yes. So the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and a lot of people like, hey, teach us more, give us more, and so on. It's like, okay, right? Like, I'm a business person. If someone says I want to buy this, I will go make it, right? If as long as it's not a strain of resources and it's not overly complicated, they're like, hey, I want to learn more. So, okay, well, let me go ahead and I'll launch an event, right? So we'll rent a hotel space and you get 20, 30 people come in and we'll talk about it all day versus a 30-minute thing. And so I sold a bunch of those. So then, all right, well, here we go. We got to make this work. And so we did. I got an awesome business partner, Max Jimenez. He and I put our heads together, and also I got amazing staff. And so we're able to put something together literally in a couple of months. And yeah, from there, it's just been steadily growing. And I would say the next major milestone was when Leon Barnes called me and says, hey, we need a sales trainer for Collective Genius. And again, anytime someone says, hey, we want you to do this, are you interested? And in my head, it's like, can this have massive positive impact? Yes. I don't know what I'm saying yes to, but the answer is yes, and we'll figure it out later on.
So that was your first revenue for that business was an event. That was your first money that you took from people in the education business. And that was an event. In that event, you filled those seats with just people that had been to the other event as well, or
people that have been to the event or people that listen to the podcast.
Okay, so that was your only advertising, is saying on a podcast, I'm going to do an event, reach out to me. Is that kind of all you did?
Oh, I guess an email list too, but yeah, so podcast and email list. So we've been building an email list, not knowing what we were going to do with the email list. So we were building an email list the whole time with the podcast. So we had, I think, over a year of good karma.
Max Maxwell's on your podcast in 18. You go to his event beginning of 2019. It's 3 years later, 2022. I met you about 18 months ago. So what does it look like after the Max Maxwell event? Like, when was it? And then you go home, get the pen and the pad, get in the lab, build something, and then you pretty quickly go to the email list, circulate it, and start. Was your pricing model the same as it is now? Is your deliverable the same?
No.
Like, what is that? What does that look like?
The pricing model is very different. It was just $1,000 for an all-day event because we're still proving in this to ourselves that this is something real. Right? Like,
you got to get through the imposter syndrome and realize you could actually make a difference.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So it was $1,000 for that. Then after people that sign up for that, I said, hey, if you guys like this, you guys want to continue doing this, it's $1,000 a month. We had a few takers, but not that many. But then, we just started talking to the people on the podcast, on the email list, like, hey, if you guys want sales training, we're going to do interactive sales training where it's once a week. It wasn't a product. It was just, hey, if you want to coach with us, weekly calls, it's $1,000 a month. We started $1,000 a month. And it was month to month. There was no upfront like commitment, because in my head, like, if there's so much value, they'll never leave. Turns out industry churn is 3 months. So after about 6 months of watching people kind of churn, we're like, all right, well, now we got to raise the price, and it's got to be a longer commitment. So we raised it to, I want to say, 10,000 for a 12-month commitment. And then now, right now it's 15K for a 6-month commitment, but we just kind of grew that over time. And what's really cool is that everyone that goes through it really sees the value. It's really easy, right? Like, one more deal pays for it. So, but it's still really rewarding. And to hear people, like, someone walked up to me and was like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm buying a Tesla because, we went through your training. It's like, wow, that's awesome. He's like, you want to know what I was driving before? It's like, what were you driving for? A 2000 Toyota Corolla. It's like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. What's your license plate?
100 mil, which is short for 100 millionaires.
And what is that? Tell Ian what that means. He doesn't know what that means.
So I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. Something I saw or read from Andrew Carnegie was that, he, obviously he spent the first half of his life making all this money and the second half of his life giving it all away. But one of the things I still remember was a journalist asked him, like, you have 18 millionaires that work for you. And remember, like, context wise, back then, millionaire was a lot of money, right? They're like, how can you possibly get all these millionaires to work for you? And he said, like, you're asking the wrong question, right? These guys weren't millionaires until they met me. And for me, that's just something that always stuck out. Like, that's a guy that's making a difference. That's a guy who's leaving the world a better place than what he found. And so when I started my brokerage, like, all right, I'm going to create 18 millionaires, 10 years from inception. But then once I started the podcast, like, okay, well, 18 is kind of low. Let's raise it to 100. We want to create 100 millionaires. And, I will know that I left a legacy that we left the world a better place, 100% without a doubt.
I love that.
Really cool story.
That's incredibly cool. So you start this monthly subscription model. Did you quickly realize I don't want to put together lots of one-day events? Is that why you went to the subscription model faster?
I went to the subscription model because that was more reliable and there was less selling. We still do events, we do events every other month, but that's like, it's active, right? It's that we're constantly having to pitch it, sell it, pitch it, sell it, and so on. Whereas the recurring model is just a one-time sell or fewer sales, and it's more recurring. So we like that model because it's more predictable income. Although now that we do it, we don't even offer that anymore, except for unless you're in Collective Genius. So for that model, we went away from a month-to-month model because we saw that people were not renewing.
Yeah. So
I'm on a-
$15,000 is $15,000 for 6 months. And that is that per company? How many people can, or is that per person? How do you
It's
set
per
it up?
company, and they can throw on as many salespeople as they want. I look at, let's say Ian's got a team. I look at Ian as the client, right?
Yeah.
I don't charge per head. I know that organizations charge per head. For me, I price it the way I would want to be treated, right? I would want you, like if I hire Ian to consult with my organization, I don't want Ian to start counting how many heads I have and says, okay, it costs this much per head. I want to say, look, Steve trains the client. Here's my deliverable. Here are the expected outcomes. And then you would judge me by whether we were able to deliver the outcome or not for your
Now,
organization.
if I paid that, so let's say I paid that for my organization. Does my organization, what do I get? What is your deliverable?
The deliverables is weekly sales trainings where we go over the content and then we go over troubleshooting, right? Like they bring in their challenges from their sales appointments. They met with a homeowner. Here's where they got stuck. So we do a lot of overcoming objections, overcoming situations. And then there's a good amount of mindset. And I've always been the kind of person that really hates talking about mindset, but a lot of people struggle with mindset, whether it's the confidence isn't there. They don't feel comfortable saying some of these things because they don't believe in themselves enough. So we spend a good amount of time talking about their mindset as well.
So for Frank's group, that's a 1 hour call once a week with you, a Zoom call. With his team,
Thursdays
with just
every
his
week.
team.
Yeah, well, it's not just his team. So for Frank's organization, he's in there with all these other guys in Collective Genius. There's 50 other teams in there, and we get as high as maybe 90 people on some of these calls. Usually, it's probably in the 50s, but we have all these guys that are within Collective Genius and their salespeople. It's mostly their salespeople, right? Frank's never going to be on that call, right? It's mostly their salespeople, and then we go through 15 to 20 minutes of content, and then we go over their sales challenges and objections, and also share like my own personal stories too, right? Like, because we're teaching sales, but it also applies to our day-to-day lives. So I'll share like, here's an experience that I had, wasn't necessarily sales related, but you can see, right, how this applies to sales, like talking about when you go to an appointment, the homeowner wants you to walk around the house, give them a number, and then they'll call you back. We want to go in there, sign a contract, right? So like expectations are really far apart initially for most appointments. And so I share like, my wife's phone is broken. I went to the Apple store and we have Apple Care. And when we went in there to get her phone fixed, it's like, Apple Care doesn't cover this. They were,
what the hell's the point of Apple Care?
Exactly, right? Expectations are very different. My expectation was Apple Care fixes phones. Apparently their expectations were a little bit different when they sold the Apple Care. So, but you can see these are applications of real life around the sales principles.
So you got 90 people on there on this one call. But are you using just software like this, or do you have your own software?
Zoom. Yeah, we use Zoom.
Zoom's
okay. Fantastic.
So 90 people are in there. Your time amount for that is the 1 hour you're on with them, but then I imagine a few hours a week building content. What are we going to talk about next week?
I would say probably an extra maybe 30, 45 minutes, just while I'm driving, just things that come up in my mind. Like, oh, I want to make sure I talk about this week. I want to touch on this topic this week.
Okay.
You've got a curriculum that you repeat and you freshen it, but it's you've got a kind of if we use the flywheel example, if it's a 6-week training or 6-month training, it's X number of modules, and then you repeat the modules. Because like I know I've had people that have gone through multiple times, like, yeah, we've seen this module, but you'll freshen it, but there's only so many principles to sales, right? So yeah.
And one thing I've learned, so one thing I learned in being a broker for 15 years now, salespeople tend to need to be more reminded more than they need to be taught.
Yep.
And so we're going through the same principles over and over again, but I totally believe in these principles. I live by these principles now. And we're just refreshing it because people forget, right? And there was a workshop I went to very recently, and they talk about drift. And drift occurs when like your superhuman self, right? Things that get us to do that's outside the normal conflict with our regular steady who we are every single day, right? There's who we want to be, which is lazy, Netflix, on the sofa all day. And then there's superhuman, which is like waking up at 5 a.m., going to work out, eating well, and so on, right? So we have superhuman and then just regular human. And we drift, right? So like they'll step up like, man, I learned this great thing. I'm going to start applying it. And then like 4 weeks later, for absolutely no reason, we'll just stop doing it. And so we got to be reminded of it.
And it's not just salespeople. You think in the world of education, that's any position really. You just it's the same. Take base. I'm a baseball coach, right? It's the same thing. It's that everyone's swing looks the same from the end of time. You got to keep reminding your little guys of the things they got to do with their hands and their hips. And you gotten into a bad habit out of a. And
Yeah.
I coach people on managing people and leading people, and same things. Like a great someone who's been managing 25 years turns around one day and they're not delegating anything, and they don't even realize what happened to them, and they're broken and their team's pissed and their morale's up. And it's like you go back through the same concepts that you go through with a kid who just started managing people 30 days ago. And it's, you don't, I think in the education business, sometimes it's just about compiling the information and organizing it better because executives are busy and don't have time to go pull it all together. And, I think having things on repeat is smart.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best lessons, right, is John Wood in the beginning of every season would teach all his players how to tie their shoes every season, right? It's just you need to be reminded.
Purdue University graduate. So your big moment on this monthly subscription basis, was it landing Collective Genius? Did that give you the core amount of revenue that you could really build around it? Was that kind of your anchor tenant?
Yeah, I would say that's my anchor, and I love the community I've joined. When I actually heard about it multiple times. Ryan Pineda, Conley, some other guys like, Steve, you got to join this. Steve, you got to join this. Like, nah, I don't really want to travel. But the amazing opportunity I had when Leon gave me a call to sign up, it's been an amazing group of people, and they've really changed my career. Right, it's helped me in my sales organization, but it's also helped me in my wholesaling organization. The guys that are on my team, like you're a wholesaler, and then you're like, you run a wholesaling business. And it's changed dramatically, the access to the caliber of people. Again, like I said, when I first joined Collective Genius, I'm going through the Dropbox. I'm like, who's this Frank Cava guy? And how come every single procedure is Frank Cava? Right? It's Frank's hiring thing. It's Frank marketing thing. It's Frank's this, Frank that. Who is this guy? I need to meet him at the next event. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, Ian, but Frank's incredibly intimidating when you meet him in person for the first time. So I didn't have my full confident voice. I was like kind of looking down when I said hi to Frank the very first time.
Yeah, I've heard that before. He'd never intimidated me, but I was always so much higher up in the organization than him that I kind of looked down on him. He was more intimidated by me when we worked together. He kind of had a lower level position at MBR. He's since rebranded, similar to like Andrew Carnegie, who was kind of an asshole for the first 50 years of his life and then rebranded himself by putting his name on buildings. Frank was kind of a douchebag for the first 40 years, and he's convinced everyone at Collective Genius that he accomplished things before he got there. It's really, really incredible what he's done. He's a master marketer.
Last week while Ian's internet broke, we talked about the incredible dynamic that we have. Ian was unable to solve a $4 an hour task last week, so he talked about how unique it is for Steve to see someone treat me like shit regularly. And I said I tend to keep coming back for more for some reason.
A glutton for punishment. So talk to me about so you've got the Collective Genius guys. Do you have other clients like that you do a call just for them?
I don't. And this could be a bad decision. I don't know. But I don't. And one of the reasons why is I'm a very loyal person, And so like I could go, there's other masterminds out there. I could go approach like, hey, what I did for CG, I can do with you guys. But I really feel like I found a community that is true or is in alignment with my beliefs. And a capitalist through and through probably would try to maximize and find more opportunities. But for me, I'm really happy in the situation I'm in, and I'd rather go deeper in this relationship versus broadening. I got a really good thing going on, and
That's
I'm really
smart.
I don't want to screw it up.
So you have 90 companies paying $15,000 every 6 months.
So I got in CG, they are month to month. So in CG, I've got 50 plus paying $1,000 a month. And then all the other ones, it is kind of like a recurring thing, right? We're finding someone else like, hey, I want to sign up. So probably 2 or 3 a month, like, hey, I want you to train my team. So that leads to, 30 to 40K a month in revenue, but that is the actively hunting versus the monthly recurring.
And
Okay.
CG has, one second, Ian, CG has a call that we're dedicated to, but then there's that other group has a call as well, right? So there's really 2 calls a week that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do have for the ones that if they got some superstars that it's like an elite level mastermind within there. So not everyone team has, or not every team has superstar, or not everyone's team is full of superstars. So every team that's got like, here are my best guys, I like to have them on their own elite level call. So we have that as well on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So all in, this takes 5 hours a week. It sounds like it's, what is it, 2 or 3 calls, a little bit of prep.
Yeah.
So it's about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably 3 hours a week now. It used to be more when I was still like dissecting the content, uploading and whatever, but no, we got the VAs to handle that now. So yeah, about 3 hours.
So Ian, what I'd like to do for Steve, because the hook to get him here was to say, let's dive into your business a little bit and talk about some of the things that maybe we're good at. Humility, clearly we really are exceptional at, but like the day-to-day and kind of what you work on. For you talked about your businesses. You got the brokerage, you got the title company, you got wholesale, you got education, you got media, and you got crypto. And then you have 2 kind of main asks of us on kind of what those are. So what I think makes sense is this. Tell us a little bit about how you pick and choose your time. And let's dive into the things you wanted to ask us about with staffing and also with like, what do you say no to?
So how do I pick and choose?
Yeah, because 5 business, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 businesses? It's a lot.
Yeah, so I would say, thank God I've got amazing people around me. So they do take care of a lot of the day-to-day stuff. So mostly if I'm involved, it's the more like where you bring in the surgeon, right? You got like the anesthesiologist, you got the nurse, they do all the prep work, right? And the surgeon just comes in, like in the heart operation, like you even got doctors that open up the cavity, and then the surgeon comes in, does his thing, and then he leaves, right? So thankfully, when I'm involved, these are like the smaller, important, but not as time-consuming things, right? But I do need to be fully focused and present. If I'm coming in to solve a problem, I need to be 100% on my A game. I can't be like on my phone or checking emails while I'm trying to diagnose these things. So fortunately, we don't have too many of those. The rest of it mostly runs on autopilot. So each company has an integrator, and a couple of them have their own visionaries to kind of drive it their own way. So like our media company, Xander's the visionary. And really the conversations that we have with him is basically, here's what I want, go make it happen. The wholesaling company, Max and Lena predominantly run it. So I'm not as much in the day-to-day operations. I'm really more involved in the meetings, the higher level meetings where they're like, here's what we're struggling with. And this is where our problem solving it comes in handy.
So for our audience and for Ian, I'm going to talk about a couple things quickly because I think it makes sense to kind of ground it a little bit. In the CG world and universe, there's a lot of scaling up, but before scaling up, there is a methodology and a kind of a mindset around the business has kind of 2 people in it. One is the innovator, and then there's kind of like an integrator. So there's like the visionary, that type of person, and then the other person who kind of does the stuff. Now, in my business, I do it differently. I have kind of department heads, and I'm the figurehead, if you will. It sounds to me like you kind of use a combination of both of those, where you are kind of somebody who is the figurehead, And also you kind of oversee all the divisions and you have people kind of in line to be able to handle those kind of businesses.
Exactly.
Because it's very, we had an interview earlier today with someone who's talking about being a manager and scaling, and it's very hard if you don't have good people to be able to manage. So that's kind of how you set it in place.
Yeah, it's so hard without the right people. And man, that was I would say that's probably the hardest skill. And I wouldn't say I've mastered it, but I've gotten a lot better at it, is finding the right people.
So we spent the beginning of this interview talking about kind of your career upbringing, college, your career with Intel, struggling as a realtor. Now you run 5 or more successful businesses that you don't work in, you work on and on top of. So what did you learn during those periods that you've implemented, and from there to here, how'd you get there?
There's a lot of screwing up and a lot of coaching. So
there's no other way around it, right?
Yeah. So I'm along the way, right? There was Craig Proctor, who was my business coach for the traditional realtor side. A lot of Darren Hardy. I think I am probably one of the biggest Darren Hardy fanboys you'll ever meet. I've literally bought every single one of his products. Gary Harper is a consultant I've hired. Right now we're going through SEAL team leaders with Larry Yatch. Has been absolutely unbelievable for us. And then I am so incredibly blessed that I have friends like Frank Cava, right? Eric Brewer, Phil Green. Hey, here's what I'm running into. What are you doing about this, right? But I would say on top of all that, the single most valuable skill of everything is finding and retaining the right talent, right? There's everyone I have, and we just let someone go this past week, which was really long overdue. I didn't know why they waited so long. I actually had to push the team, actually just stopped me. As like, guys, this is the 4th time we talked about this individual in the last 5 or 6 weeks. Why have you not fired this person yet? Right. But all in all, I would say the skill is in finding, interviewing, training, managing, and retaining talent is the skill that's helped me more than anything else in running these companies.
So I want to ask 2 things here. The first one is your internet presence and your social media presence. How has that changed the client, the people who are willing to come work for you? Because in my life, it's drastically different.
Yeah, it's a lot easier because now they know you, they like you, and they trust you. Before, when I used to just post on Craigslist, I'm interviewing you, you're interviewing me, right? It's a two-way street.
It's a real sketchy setup that way.
Yeah.
Right.
No absolutely.
Right.
And I'm looking you up on Facebook. I'm making sure you're not like your face isn't tatted, right? All these things we have to do.
Yeah.
Social media has changed the interview from me selling people on why they want to come work here to them selling me on why they want to be a part of it, which I think is drastic. So
yeah,
finding, hiring, and retaining is a different skill, but finding and interviewing and sorting to get good people. What's your process there? Because this is something Ian and I spend a lot of our time on in this podcast.
Honestly, it's been a struggle up until this month. It's been a massive struggle. Everyone we've found these days is predominantly by referral. It has been a lot harder to find talent. I think in the last 2 years. Prior to COVID, man, we were running on all cylinders. If we wanted to hire somebody, it was pretty easy. After COVID, things, I kind of had this theory that everyone became either a crypto millionaire or an econ millionaire or something. It was a lot harder to get talent to walk through the door. But a lot of what we've done is posting on social media, email blasting, and then asking really, again, the best source really been is just internally within the organization. Do you know anyone? And we just hired someone last week, another referral from within the organization. They can't stop bragging about the company that they work at to their friends and family.
We have 2 full-time headhunters and recruiters, and more than 70% of the people who we hire are through referral. So one of the things that Ian and I talked about before we started this with you is we talked a lot about hiring mistakes. So there are any hiring mistakes that because I think this will pivot perfectly into kind of where you're going with your questions to us. What kind of hiring mistakes did you make in the beginning?
I think for the most part, I didn't hire out of desperation. I learned that lesson from somebody else beforehand, right? If you're waiting till you need someone to hire, it's really bad. So fortunately, I avoided that mistake. I think the mistakes I've made is not in hiring, but in training. Thinking that they'll figure it out, thinking that they'll be resourceful, right? Like the questions that they ask is like, did you put any thought into this before coming to ask me about this? Right. So I think the training was really bad on my part in setting the expectations, setting the tone, letting them know what kind of work environment they're joining, right? Like resourcefulness, it's not a core value, but it's a very valuable attribute in our organization. So we didn't have core values. So, we found out later on after creating core values, like, wow, we got some really crappy people here, right? Now that we've raised the bar on what's acceptable at our company, I remember I went to 2 separate Darren Hardy events, and each one I went to, and these are like 2 months apart. Each one I went to, I came back, I fired 2 people because each time I went to an event, it's like, oh, we've got to raise the bar on the people at the company. And so I would say not hiring the core values probably was one of the big mistakes, not realizing how important it was.
Or just defining them. It sounds like you weren't even defining when you say core values, to me, sometimes that feels a little pie in the sky. What you're really just saying is these are the behaviors that we value in this company, the kind of my non-negotiable behaviors I have to see out of you, and I'm going to put them down in writing. And it's funny, a lot of companies don't think about it that way. They're just hiring, and they're kind of interviewing for certain things. But, until you've put it in writing, then you stop and you look at it and you say, half our team doesn't fit this. We're really, in the way you build those behaviors, you look at your top people and say, I wish I had more of these. And that's how you define the behaviors you want in your company, is by looking at your absolute best people. And then you look at it and say, okay, if that's really what we're hiring for, why are we accepting these folks that don't have any of these behaviors?
Why are we tolerating this?
Yeah. Why are we tolerating it? So that's pretty fascinating. You said that, onboarding is, it's interesting to me just how many companies put so much thought into the interview process, panel interviews, they test, they drug test, they go check background checks. Then the person gets an offer and no one talks to them again. And 2 weeks later, they show up in the office and no one's ready for them. They don't have equipment and they don't really have a plan. And I think some of that comes down to, Steve, when I work with managers all the time, is they just forget what it's like to be new in a company. They forget what it's like to be the new person. And so, for them, the job's over when they got them to accept the offer letter. But really, that person hasn't stopped thinking about you since they accepted the offer. It's the biggest thing in their life. That day is like a date they'll remember the rest of their life. Whereas for you, it's Monday. And, then they show up and it's not, you haven't made it special that first day and first week and really first month, really. And they're deflated. Now they're thinking it's all a scam.
100%. And I think it's really indicative of human behavior, like sales and marketing. Like when you hire someone, you bring them on, like we market it to them and we sold them on the vision. And then our fulfillment sucks, which is what I was doing for a very long time.
Yeah. And I think it's indicative of startups, right? Startups are so worried. You went through that period after Intel to finally making money. Like you're just in survival mode and you think you still have to be in survival mode and you forget there's other people on the life raft with me now. And when you get better at that, I find social media really, it makes people understand who they're coming to work for. Everybody knows I curse because I do it here. I do it all over the internet. It's beeped out. Like they know, like in an interview, it doesn't shock them. Like when they hear it, so it helps grease the skids. And then you start putting people in place who are going to make sure, like one of the things that we do now is we make sure that every single week between your offer and your start date, at least once a week, someone's talking to you. It's a text, it's a call, it's just little stuff. And then in some instances, we won't start you on Monday because Monday's just so damn busy. We'll start you on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Or if we have you on a Monday, we have a plan. Like here's your manila folder with your first month of your skit, like little things like that. Like, wow, they didn't forget about me. They knew I was, you know what I mean? That's like little stuff.
So I will say the other thing that's really helped me a lot, which I'm learning I'm not doing as well as I thought I was I've done a lot of the leadership following John Maxwell's principles on the good leaders ask great questions, which was, the 3 questions is like, do you care about me? can I trust you? And do you believe in me? Right. Like these are things that, if I go survey your team right now and ask them, like, these 3 questions, and if it's not like a yes, if it's not a fast yes, like you've got some organizational issues. Right. And so that's really helped me a lot in carrying the companies. But I will also share, I am not warm and fuzzy. The feedback I've gotten at times is like, man, Steve's like really cold or distant at times. But that's just how I am emotionally. So thankfully, I've got other people now. We've gotten to a place now in our companies where I have other people to love on the people on a regular basis, because I am out here dreaming about the future. I'm not warming and loving, right, and at the company. So that's been another mistake recently that we've fixed that I didn't think was a major issue, but it clearly was.
Over time, you start to realize, like, we were literally doing an interview earlier today with someone who's in his first managerial role, right? And he's learning about delegation. He's learning about this. Here's some of the things that he's struggling with. And what you realize is that we can't all be everything, and you have to fill the gaps with what you're not. You got to own it and say, I'm going to put people here who are going to do these things. Like, it's pretty easy for those of us that are entrepreneurs. Like, I got to hire a bookkeeper. I got to hire a salesperson. We also need to hire, like, do you need an expressive who's your person that talks to new employees? Like, who's the glue that holds that stuff together? Like, hey, so-and-so starts Monday, we got to buy t-shirts, like just like little, like, who's thinking about that? And honestly, it shouldn't be the owner, because you got to be thinking about bigger things.
Right. Absolutely.
So Ian, if you're cool with it, what I'd like to do at this point is, Steve, you had a couple of questions for us. Let's move to them. Let's talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, so it was funny. I had an intervention. I didn't even realize it, but I walked into intervention, which is basically Steve needs an executive assistant. It's like, because I was like, "What are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "You're not always doing what you're saying you're going to do on the calendar." And what the primary complaint was from the media team, because I have a responsibility to keep everything moving forward, is to record more content, and I would. My calendar is so freaking full these days, where if someone wants to, I need to have an important meeting. For example, Jason Medley says, Steve, we need to talk. I'm going to talk to Jason, right? And so I'm going to find a place to make that work. And unfortunately, there were times where I was sitting in media time, right? And this goes to anyone that's, successful. Their calendars are pretty busy too. So I got to find a place that fits their calendar, fits my calendar. And unfortunately, what got sacrificed a lot was a media team. And so they were frustrated, and they're like, Steve, you need a personal assistant that's going to either be a gatekeeper, or if this is an important meeting that you need to hold, then your executive admin needs to make up for that time somewhere else in your calendar. Okay, fine. You have to meet with this person, but you have an opening somewhere else. Let's set that side of time now to make up for the lost recording time. So I've never had an executive admin before. I've had people to help me execute my vision for over 10 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I've never had an executive admin. And so I don't know what I'm walking into. So I would love some best practices on working with an executive admin.
Ian, you want to take a first stab at this? You want me to do it? So I have one now who's incredible. Her name is Carla. Ian knows her. Ian adores Carla. I've had a lot of the wrong ones in the past. So for me, the most important thing for an EA, we call her my chief of staff, actually, but she functions as an EA as well. She needs to understand the business. Like, she really needs to get it. And I've had all the wrong people who just didn't understand how to synthesize what's important and what isn't. So in my world, having someone we promoted from within a couple of times was the person I needed to promote up into that role, because this person spends the most amount of time with me of anybody who works here. So if you don't know what we do, if you don't understand where things are, if you can't process quickly and understand that is good for his time, that is bad for his time, it's going to be a mess. And she also looks at my email. Like, it's rare, maybe once a week, there's something that's in my email that I missed. Like, I'm like, where was that? She's like, oh, I deleted it. I'm like, okay, can you put that back in? But she knows, like, I probably get 400 emails a day, and I look at like 12 because she gets rid of 388 emails, and she might screw up one out of 400 a week, which is a pretty good average. So yeah. It's like, but there's trust there. And I know that if something isn't right, I can say, hey, I really want this. Where isn't there? She's like, well, this was my thought process. Like, sound, can we adjust this? But there's no way in hell you can get that person from the street, and it's going to take time to build it. So do you have the person maybe identified on your staff who could be this role?
Yeah. So we have someone that's in our organization. She was prior to this role, basically the office manager. You know, she's taking care of supplies,
Perfect.
making sure things are clean.
Yep.
So she's not in the meetings, but she is present. She sees the hustle and bustle within the office.
Yep. So I was in sales. I was a young kid. I was like 20, 27, 28. And the sales manager was like, we need this piece. And like, I was just a peon at this point, but I had already been a manager and moved into sales. And they're like, we need to get this. And I'm like, well, okay, go get it. And they're like, well, we can't. And I like walked down the other side of the hall, and I went to the closet, and I just pulled out like 4 of them. I go, here, like, does this work? They're like, holy shit, I didn't even know that was there. But like, so the reason that that's relevant is because that's what an office manager will know. They know where the t-shirts are. They know who can handle what. Like, so they're already kind of helping to spin some of the plates.
Yeah. So the things that I've set as far as like, here's like what looks like to me for a perfect world is if I never need to respond to another text message or another email, if I can never check my email again, right? Where all my time is spent, here's where you need to be, right? Here's where you need to be, and here's what you need to do. And just in that moment, I get to do what I do best, right? That's perfect world. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but that's where I said, like, this is where I want this to get to.
You hear that, Ian? The kid with the academic scholarship to UCLA figured out how to scale text.
Totally. So I think you've already started to think about it a little bit, Steve. I think where a lot of people go wrong with an executive admin is, one, they don't hire a qualified enough person to do it. And it sounds like you have the right person to do it. You know, what Frank's not talking about is his is an incredibly high paid executive assistant. This is not an executive assistant. She's an executive. So she can handle 400 of Frank's emails a week, but she's not a $40,000 a year person. She's multiple. That is correct. So, you know, I think, one, they understaff it with someone not talented enough to keep up with a really high performing person like yourself. And then 2, they don't know how to define what a good job looks like. So if you were to hire a salesperson, really clear, I need $7 million a year of revenue from you, which is a growth percentage of 20% from last year. Pretty simple. Generate this many leads, get this much revenue. If you're doing that, you'll keep your job and I'll pay you bonuses. If you're not, I'm going to find someone else to do it. Okay, salesperson hears that. They're like, shit, got my marching orders. Need to kind of figure out how to work my way around, but I know what to do.
I know where deliverables are. I know how I'm going to be measured.
Yeah, that's it. So how are you going to measure this person? They just need to know coming in there, what does a good job look like? And I think a lot of people struggle with that because, well, it's an assistant, just make me better. And that's not real helpful to an assistant. They really want to know the specifics of how I can make you better. What are things you want? So that's good to start with. I never want to open an email. Okay, that's good. But there's more to it than that. You also don't want people on the other end of those emails to be pissed off. You also, like, how quick are you responding? What are you responding with? What do you like to see? What don't you want to see? Are you a reader? Are you a listener? There's a lot of things that you have to kind of sit down and really get into the weeds with them on, of this is how you can make me a much better CEO of my company. And here are the things that I'm going to measure you on. And some of them I can't pull out of a report, but this is really important. You know that I will see this as a raving success if you do these things for me.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think that's very
define
clear.
The outcomes. Define the outcomes you want out of this position. It's more concrete than you think it is, right? A lot of times, like, assistant, just do the busy work for me. And one thing that you might think about going and doing is go look at try to really write down everything you did in your calendar for like 2 weeks. And I mean,
I'm gonna jump in right now. So this is my weekly to-do list. It's 5 pages, front and back. But it's perfect. It's basically like 16 categories, and everything fits into it for every business, inclusive of stuff that's kind of like further afield. Like, I've got like debt on here. I've got banking. I have stuff. But what's really helpful is I have the categories. I have this week, I have phone calls, I have follow-up, then I have acquisition, I have leads. I won't get into all of it. But what happens is when I built this, Carla could then think of things like I think of things. And then we could calibrate what we were doing. Like it's 16th on Frank's list. These things come above it and she knows where it sits. And it's kind of a dance partner or a marriage in a way. And because you're giving away your intel, like you get your information in your business through text messages, through phone calls, and through email. If you're giving that to a gatekeeper, you're going to lose that. So if it doesn't synthesize and come to you, hey, make this go away, like customers could be bitching about something. If it doesn't come to you and they're not giving you 360 feedback, you very quickly realize, holy crap, I have a revenue problem because this wasn't making it to me. So but those are the little things you have to talk about. And it takes a tremendous amount of time. Like if you think you put 40, 50 hours a week into these things or whatever it is, it's a fool's errand to think I can just have one conversation and it goes away. It's a crafting. And then there comes down to you answer stuff together for a while. Then they answer it and say, here's what I'm thinking about saying. There's a calibration. But that is the process and it has to be constantly mined.
Yeah. So I think the one good thing is we've had other people monitoring my emails in the past. So for the most part, she's mostly running traffic control, right? She's forwarding to the right departments because I really shouldn't be getting that many emails. And then right now, I might be making a mistake here, just given this conversation here. I have a morning call with her, 15, 20 minutes. Hey, what are the things that you need, that you're waiting on from me to move forward, right? To respond to these text messages and emails. Maybe I need to have more of those a day. Right now, I only have one, like on my morning commute to work.
Just to show how bad Frank's doing it in life, that's my to-do list for the week. It's only got like one thing on there and it's kind of just a long thing, but I don't have 4 pages of bullshit. That's why Frank's life is so much more stressful than mine is. That's mine.
Well,
so
yeah, Frank's thing.
It's also the reason why I
thing's-
have so much. Go ahead.
Frank's thing's driving me crazy. Man, if I had to do 16 things, I just think everything would
here's
fall apart.
where Frank cut me off. So let me tell you my thoughts on this. So the other thing that
It's so rare that someone cuts
the only
you
thing you
off.
could do instead of making a 16-page list of bullshit to give her, go through your calendar and really think about over the next 2 weeks. And what I would challenge you to think about, you've got incredibly profitable business. Write down the things that someone at your pay grade needs to be doing. So needs to be doing. And I think you said something earlier, a really important one for you. You have an incredible social media following, and I would be leaning into that, creating content, really important. So anything that is keeping you from creating content, you need to then think about customer interfacing with Jason, making sure that weekly call is absolutely unbelievable every week. Right? So how can I spend more time preparing? How can I blow people's minds? How can I get more stories out of that? Because that's your golden egg. You don't want to lose that. You want to make sure that when those people go back and talk to their owner, they're saying, I really like that weekly call. So I would, just having listened to you today, those are 2 incredibly important things that I think require your brain and someone at your pay grade. I would say another thing is thinking about your staffing, thinking about the people on your team. You said something earlier, it was really important. Sometimes it takes the boss to say, fire that person. I'm sick of hearing this. So thinking about, do I have the right team? How do I get the right team? If I want to get to my goals in 3 years, what does this team need to look like? How different is it? Just time to think, creating that content, interfacing with the customer, maybe figuring out, it might be something of figuring out a way. Collective Genius is big for you. How do I take a lot of what I do weekly and build it into a video program that I can sell without Steve involved? So you talked about, I'm very loyal. That's awesome. I have a very big anchor tenant right now in my management program. And I'm a little like you. When my window with them is going on any given day, nothing interrupts me. My phone's off, everything. They get all of my time. When they call me, I pick up. I'll hang up on Frank if I have to. But I also sell online programs of people I've never met before, where I will get an email saying you sold a $1,900 program. Awesome. I'll never talk to them. I'll never meet them. They just get my 12-week program, but they don't get the weekly coaching. So
Yeah.
that could be something you build where you're not infringing on collective genius, but maybe you have a 6-week or a 12-week sales program that is priced really affordably for someone who owns a business of 3 people or 4 people. But those are things in your business when you say, where should I be spending my time with 6 businesses? Think about, and it's not 20, it's not 16 pages. For you, it might be just 5 or 6 things that really move the envelope. And then that's one piece of paper. Write those things down. Really think hard about that. Keep it to like 5 things if you can at first. And then I would say the next piece of paper is going to be longer. Then say, what are all the things keeping me from spending more time where I really could be making a difference? And then write all of that down. Then sit down with your executive assistant and say, see these 5 things? I should be spending 80% of my time on it if I want to make a lot of money. Here's a page of things that are keeping me from doing it. What can you take off of me? And how can I make it easier for you to take those things off of me? Because I don't want to do these things if I don't have to. I want to spend all of my time on these executive level, high pay grade things that require the founder, the owner of the company. And I want to do a lot less of these. And the reason why I'm saying to take that approach is people in any job are going to be way more bought in when they feel like they have autonomy on how to do their job. So instead of just like, hey, get my dry cleaning. Hey, call this person back and tell them I'm going to be late. Hey, set up this meeting. Those are kind of tasks and you're going to do plenty of that. But it'd be really cool if you said, here's all the things I spend time on that I consider wasteful for me. I would love your input on how you and your role can take a lot of this off of me and transition it off. Now you've made your assistant feel empowered. Now you've made this person feel like I'm in control and I'm respected. While he respects my opinion, that I get to kind of, you want her to feel like she's building her own role and not just being told what to do, because none of us really love being just told what to do. You want her to feel like I'm in control here. Steve is actually letting me design this role in the best way to help him. And as long as
Steve is my client and I get to service a great client.
As long as she knows that her main job is making you more productive and more efficient, and she has some control over how to do that, and you respect her thoughts when she comes to you on that, she's going to love that role and she's going to be bought in. She's going to stay a long time. And, just like Carla with Frank, there's a lot of respect there. And she likes working there and she likes doing a lot of those things because Frank gives her a lot of autonomy on how to do her job, so long as he's getting the results and the outcomes he expects out of an executive.
That's great. I was going to have her just listen to this podcast, but that last part you said, I can't have her listen to that because then it's your idea and not mine. But yeah,
I think
you're the one feel like you got this brilliant insight.
I think that you're the one earlier said there's no new ideas. It's I don't know. It's modeling if it's taken from multiple places. It came from me and Frank. It isn't stealing.
It's just repackaging. Repackaging.
One of the things that you mentioned to me as well before we got on the call, Steve, is how do you say no? I think we inadvertently said walk through that a little bit, but why don't we explore that a little bit further while we're all here on how do you say no?
Yeah, so I've gotten better at saying no over time, right? Because I've, again, we learn from hard knocks and overcommitting and straining resources and pissing off your team. So I do say no more often now, but right now, we've got these businesses. So the crypto thing was a new thing, right? That one started last week, or came to terms Thursday, Friday last week. But we got that, and then we have other successful business owners, right? That say, hey, here's something I want to do. I want to do this with you. And it sounds exciting. Like, Jason Lewis, he says, hey, we should start a lead manager training program together. Jason Lewis, an opportunity to work with him? Yes. Right. Like, there was no hesitation. But those are opportunities that are coming across more and more. And I'm like, they all sound like great opportunities. So like, what metrics, what kind of process should I come up with to figure out if this is an opportunity I should pursue or not? Because I say no to a lot of things, but it's getting harder and harder to say no to some of these amazing opportunities.
So the first thing I hear on this is Ian said 5 in the conversation we had earlier. I had a conversation with one of my executives this morning, and I talked to him about breaking things in the components of 5 as well. I think the ideal person does 3 to 5 things very well, and past that, it really starts to get limited. So what I heard you say is there's these new things that keep coming in. I think you have to constantly rate your 5. Now, we joked about 5 pages and 18 items. There's a lot of little things that don't get touched very often. I just don't want to forget about them. Like your salespeople in the training, you need constant reminders. Like, hey, these are very low on the list, but they're there and we don't want to forget them. So let's just note it, make sure it's written. And for me, that works. But I think there's got to be a process in your life. And Ian can talk about this very well, because where I'm at in my life, I can't get it that simple. But Ian very intentionally has gotten himself to a point where it's very simple. And it was a very intentional series of moves that took him there. Now, I might, and I contemplate it, especially as my kids are getting older, but it sounds to me like if you come down to 5 things, you need to start a process of filtering. Does something take precedence over these 5? And it can take a little bit of time. Hey, I want to get on the phone with Jason Lewis. I got to understand it. I need to explore it. I got my executive assistant do a little research or dive into it a little bit. And then it comes down to choices of, do I say yes to this or not? And there's not a right answer. It could be, it's the wrong season for me. But continually upgrading your problems, I think, is a definition of success. As you continue to get a higher level or a higher class of problem, you're succeeding at a pretty high level.
Right. Yeah. And I'm incredibly blessed, right? Like, these are things people were like, hey, would you be interested in doing this? Like 3 years ago, I would have paid an arm and a leg to, like, oh my God, yes. Now it's like, man, that's amazing. I don't know how I could do this, or I don't know if I do this, how it's going to hurt me elsewhere.
So I think you just got to, I was going to just tell you my 3 questions that I ask, at least at this point in my life, when someone brings something new to me is, and it's going to sound corny, but is it fun? Does it sound fun? I'm to that place in my life where I don't do shit that doesn't sound fun. So is it fun? Is it profitable? What are the unintended consequences? And the third one's the most important one, because you can always kind of talk yourself into something being profitable. You're guessing a little bit, and you can kind of talk yourself into that should be fun. But the fun thing is kind of a gut reaction for me of like, do I really want to do it? But the unintended consequences is just a function of time. So if you getting into crypto took your time away from your education business to the point where people started complaining at Collective Genius that your weekly call wasn't what it used to be, I would say that was a terrible move, because that is your anchor tenant. Your whole business was built around that revenue. Your staffing is built around that consistent revenue. It's a very smart thing you've done in building that. So, I think the unintended consequence is you have to know what you're really good at. So Frank and I talk, I've never wavered from this. Whenever Frank starts saying like, maybe I should go to Savannah or Charleston, or, I'm always like, do you have the whole market in Richmond? And it's like, no. I'm like, keep kicking ass, be Mr. Richmond. Like, every dollar you put into Richmond has a higher return than you taking and building new offices in other places. Now, when you get to the place where you think Richmond's completely saturated, cool, but pour your resources back into what you're already amazing at. There are hundreds of cities Frank could go replicate his model on, but that's going to drag him away from his business. It's going to stress him out. And I'll give you one more example on this. My father-in-law has a trucking business. It's trailer repairs, right? So he had a big shop downtown Chicago. Polish guy, he's an awesome guy, an uneducated dude, but built an incredible business downtown Chicago. And just because he was young and full of piss and vinegar, someone told him about a lot that was like 30 miles away, and you should expand. You should expand. You don't have enough bays. We have more. We'll give you more business. And, he kind of got talked into doing it because he thought he should do it. His ambition got in his way. Bought another shop 30 miles away, which is like an hour and a half in traffic in Chicago. And so he's going back and forth shop to shop, right? He's trying to hire a manager. And while he's trying to hire a manager in the new shop, the old manager that he's got watching the shop is stealing from him. He can't get enough people, so he moves some of his best people from his Chicago down to the new one. Now that service starts going bad. Those customers start leaving him. He's getting pulled in two directions. He couldn't be less happy, and put a lot of strain on his family, everything else. One day he just said, why did I do this? And he sold one of the shops, and ever since he's kept that one shop. And by pouring himself into it, it just gets more profitable every single year. He's been running it for 40 years. But I've always thought of that example. Whenever something new comes my way, I always have to think, well, what am I giving up? And am I happy to give up? If I'm happy to give up the old thing, cool. That's cool. I'll do the new thing. But if taking on something new is going to drag the other stuff that I like doing, it's fun, that's profitable, and that I'm good at it. If the new thing takes away from those three things, then I just say no to the new thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Part of the unintended consequences, and we get better at it over time, but we haven't perfected that. And I think that's just spending more time thinking about where things can go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, every real estate deal I've done with Frank, 95% of our conversations before we, sign paperwork is thinking about all the things that could go badly, all the reasons why we don't want to. What are all the reasons why we don't want to go raise $4 million from our friends and put it into this? What are all the reasons that could make us have to look them in the eyes and say, we lost your money? We spend all our time thinking about that. And I think that served me well in decisions for my career, in being offered to do certain things. I always think hard about all the things that could possibly go wrong. That doesn't mean I'm a pessimist, but I try not to be too rosy about looking at every opportunity. And sometimes it's just, are you bored? Are you just bored of what you were doing? So you want to do something new because your mind races too much, Ian? And sometimes that's the answer. And I'll say, yeah, I'm kind of bored. That's not a good reason to just go say yes to everything either. Because being miserable is worse than being bored. Being miserable is way worse than being bored.
Ian and I did a 75 unit portfolio that was worth 15 million bucks. And we did 3 buildings that are worth somewhere between 5 and 8 million bucks. Right. And we spent countless hours worrying about it, thinking about it, going through it. I'll tell you 2 things we didn't come up with: a global pandemic and double-digit inflation. We didn't contemplate that. So we did every little thing you could possibly do and say, yep, there's no way these could go wrong. And you still have to put time and effort into it because you have to perform. But that's what's beautiful about where we're at in our lives, is we get to change directions based on what the world throws at us. But what I know of you and what we've talked about is you want to have a short number of things on that list. You want to function on the things. You come up with your list of 3 to 5 drivers. Ian's got his very well defined with fun and with profitable, and what are the unintended consequences. And I know his non-negotiables. Like, we can't do this podcast past 2 almost any time of the year because he's at baseball practice. And I got to go. I got to get it in the gym, and I got to pick up IJ. We got to go to the cage. Like, I've been doing this with him for almost 2 years. Like, I know that is it can't be after 2. All right, buddy. Anything else for us?
No, I think this is awesome. I really appreciate, as one podcaster to another, I really appreciate the depth you guys go into. I think this is awesome. It's magnificent. It's a pleasure of mine to be on this.
You've been an awesome guest for sure. I would say just behind the 12-year-old kid from Britain that we had come on here and talk about his back massage business. Was it back massage and car cleaning? Wash. You didn't quite live up to that kid. He's pretty incredible. But you're a close second behind him, I guess.
All right.
He's
well,
13
he's 12
now. He's 13 now, so you're good.
Well, my daughter's 11, so I'm gonna have her watch that episode. I was like, look what you got to compete against.
Yep. And then when she starts a business, I want her on this business, and she'll bump to third.
We'll send you that episode. His name was Yanni. He's awesome. He literally was.
That's awesome.
British kid who's 12.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, in time management, all the stuff you have going on, Steve's a big deal. He literally has a whole system that he puts people through so they don't talk to him. Like, hey, you want to schedule time with me? I'll send you a bill first. When you pay the invoice, then I'll do a 15-minute call with you, which I think is just incredible. And he took the time to be with us. I greatly appreciate it. Friend to friend, thank you.
Hey Frank, let's let Steve tell people how they can find him or
Perfect.
search him up. How can people find you? How can they reach out to you? How can they learn more about you?
The best way to get a hold of me is funny enough, right? With today, 2022, is Instagram at steve.trang. There's also stevetrang.com, disruptors.com. And then if you're interested in our podcast, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, just Real Estate Disruptors. Those are the best
And
ways
if
to
you're an
find me.
owner, is your sales program available or is that coming soon? Is that another one of those things you're trying to figure out whether to say yes or no to?
So we do have a sales program. If you go to disruptors.com, you will find it. It is geared towards buying houses. So just to be clear.
Yep.
But yeah, we do have that sales platform on disruptors.com.
Well, fantastic. You got a lot to be proud of in your career, man. I'm fascinated by everything you've done. It's incredible.
Well, I appreciate that. It's just got to stay focused, which is the hardest part. I've got massive shiny object syndrome.
Yeah. Well, just get yourself a smaller to-do list. That makes life easier. This has me stressed out, Frank. I'm totally stressed about getting this done this week. Really stressed
about
about it.
Three things. I can't have more than 3 things on my to-do list. I'm really good at delegating, borderline abdicating, right? Not as good as that part, but I am not a person that does things. I'm a person that dreams and assigns.
Yeah, man.
Steve, thanks again. And I wanted to introduce you to my biggest asshole friend. You've now met Ian.
Nice to meet you, Ian.
Very nice to meet you, Steve. And I'm proud of that,
Thanks,
Frank.
buddy.
I'm proud that I'm in the #1 spot still.
Of course. See you, man.
Guys.